Hey. Welcome back to Corporate Law 101, an entrepreneur's guide. We're now going to go into Section 1, Part 2A, Articles of Incorporation. Well, here is an Articles of Incorporation for the state of Illinois. I also have one for the state of Washington, and we'll go through the two of them to kind of show you some of the similarities and some of the differences between the two. The first thing they ask for is the corporate name. And the corporate name, if you'll look underneath here, says it must be corporation, company, incorporated, limited, or some abbreviation thereof, like CO, Inc., things of that sort. So that's the first thing they're going to want. We talked about the registered agent. They want to know who it's the first name, middle initial, last name, address, city, state, and zip, things of that sort, okay? Then the purposes of the corporation. And in my mind, we just leave the standard transaction of any and all businesses that are lawful in the state. And that's pretty much what you want to be able to do. And in this case, it's, as I say, it's Illinois, but almost all of them use the similar language for that type of activity. The next thing and this is very, very important because it's going to be the second part of our discussion. We'll begin to talk about what are authorized shares versus issued shares and consideration received. Here you have to define the total number of shares. That's the authorized shares and the class of shares. Most of the time, this is going to be common shares along the way, okay? So it's going to be fundamentally common. The functionality there, number of authorized shares, it can be between 1 and 100,000, okay? Some states charge you, be very careful, because some states charge you over 1,000 shares. They start charging you so much per share. If you do 1,000,000 shares, you can get a whopper of a bill, $4,000 to $6,000 for just to set up shares. If you stay in the 1,000 shares, you generally don't have a problem. In states where they don't charge you for the shares, I generally try to use 100,000. It just allows me to give shareholder certificates to people. Instead of giving 2 shares, you get 20,000 shares. It just sounds like you get more. They don't mean anything more. There's still a percentage of the company when they're added together, things of that sort. And we'll go through that math and how that works. So we can talk about that structure. And then the number of shares to be proposed to be issued should be the same 100,000 or the same 1,000. And the consideration is almost always $1,000. You take $1,000, you go get your FEIN number, which we talked about earlier, from the federal government to give you the employer identification number, or FEIN, Federal Employer Identification Number. You go to the bank, you put your $1,000 in, they'll open your account in the name of the business, and that $1,000 that you put in is basically how you purchased these shares. Now, all you've done by filing this with the Secretary of State and putting your $1,000 in there and then ultimately signing the document is basically set up the corporation as a founder incorporator. You do not yet have any shares. The owners don't have any ownership yet. There's nothing been agreed to until the founders' first meeting where all of that is set out. The next thing on this list is the number of directors. In this case, in Illinois, your directors are optional for the first year. In other states, they're not optional. You need to tell them right away. And we'll talk about what a director is and does, but here's where you determine how many their directors they're going to be. So the initial board of directors up here, the initial board will be, and that's generally 1, 3, 5, up to 9. I can tell you anything over about 5 is a hard thing to handle, and if you're a small company, 3 is plenty. You should just have your meetings on a regular basis, and it should be reflective of the shareholders and owners, but it should be outside parties as well to keep you kind of balanced and give you a little what I call mental basketball back and forth. If you wish to identify your your directors at the front end of the corporation, name, address, city, state, and zip, this is public information, folks. So if you use addresses, if they have business addresses, or you use the company address for those if you have an address. Otherwise, these addresses become public information, and they will be have junk mail like crazy, okay? Then the state, in this particular case, asks several questions related to the amount of value of property that will be held in the state, the value of the property located just in the state, the gross amount of business you're expected to do. Again, just read the questions carefully of the individual companies, and away you go. You'll be very happy. Then basically remember to date and put your year in, print your name, your address, your state, and then of course you print this out and put your signature in. Unless you file online in the various states, if you file online, then you're signing with a digital signature. Okay, here's the same thing, Articles of Incorporation now for the state of Washington. This is the Washington For-Profit Corporation. Again, the name of the corporation, number of authorized shares, that's the 1,000 or 100,000. Are they common or are they preferred? Preferred shares, you need to talk to an attorney because they have what are called preferences. And if they're preferred, you want to attach a description of the preferences to the Secretary of State's filing. What is the effective date? Generally upon filing of the Secretary of State, and the tenure is generally perpetual. Okay. The only reason you might not is you're setting up a joint venture. You only want it to last 3 to 5 years. You pick 5 years and say it will destroy itself basically at the end of the 5th year. The name and address of the Washington State Registered Agent. Again, I'm not going to go. Your signature, and then the signature and information on the incorporator. And that's it for now for this tutorial. These tutorials are copyright to BrainTech CSI Inc., all rights reserved.